before we get started, I did want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about who we are. I know many of you. I've been involved in the oceans for quite some time now, and have had some fun diving experience with my dear friend Sylvia here. Done some work up in the Arctic, about 300 miles north of the Arctic Circle. And as I look at where we're going as a species, have been thinking a lot about where we've come from as a species over the last several years. Also with us today is Jon Waterhouse. Jon is an amazing fellow. I'm going to let him talk a little bit about his story. He is focused on connecting people. I was going to say indigenous peoples, but it's way more than that. At some level, we're all indigenous peoples, I think, at the end of the day. He is a National Geographic explorer, and as a matter of fact, has just come back from a really interesting trip in a part of Russia that we're going to ask him to talk a little bit about here in a minute. And then, of course, many of you have heard of this woman. We've put her in the center because she deserves the center stage. National Geographic explorer Sylvia Earle, author of many, many books. I know it's not 200 books, but it is 200 books and articles and publications. Prolific. You should get all these books, by the way. They're all great books. She has been in the water for some time, since she was a little girl in New Jersey, and holds the record for going the deepest in something called a gym suit here, sort of a one-person submarine, if you will, that goes to the bottom of the sea and lets you have some movement, very much like an astronaut might wear on the moon or in space. Yeah, and you spent your birthday a couple of years ago scuba diving in the Arctic, because one should.
Yeah, of course.
Right? What else should one do? And this woman has a Lego set. You can go out and buy the Sylvia Earle Lego set. In this day and age, that is how you know you've arrived, is when you
in
have
a submarine.
Yes, yeah, and it comes with a submarine, of course. She'll talk about this too. She has a submarine problem. She's addicted to them. Real serious addiction to submarines. If you are live tweeting right now, please use the hashtag #GSummit and hashtag #SingularityU. And these are our Twitter handles if you'd like to reference anything during the session with us as well. Okay, so we talked about the fact that this session was called and put in the program as Managing the Planet. But as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh no, Sylvia's not going to be happy with a session called Managing the Planet. It really needs to be a session on managing ourselves. And to just do a little bit of level setting here, I think it's important for us to recognize, and sorry guys, I only have one way button on my thing here. That's okay, oh, there we go. It's a big, beautiful blue planet. By the way, do you notice that? When you look at the Earth from space, do you see when you look at it from the right side how it's just blue? It's just ocean, right? We are the most ironically named planet in the solar system. That's a fact. 7 billion of us sharing. There's been a lot of hoopla. We're not here today to debate climate change, global warming. It's real, like we know that. It's been something we've been thinking about and studying and researching for a long time. This is a research paper from 1896. We all should know about the Keeley curve. If you don't, write it down, look it up. We understand exactly what is going on with regards to things like CO2 buildup. We are firmly in the Anthropocene. There is no question about it. We are exerting various pressures on this planet. There's no questions about it. We've been doing it for some time now. We've really ramped it up in the last 100 years. We love our planet. We love our oceans. We like to live by it and swim in it. It doesn't always work out so well in some places when we decide to live by the ocean. This is, of course, people who've moved out onto the water because the big city in the background that you'll see in a moment here doesn't have any more land for them to settle on. And it's just fascinating to see that this is what parts of our world look like when we have big cities with skyscrapers right there as well. It is getting hotter. We're setting records. We have sophisticated technology that is measuring it and telling us that. We have ice core samples that tell us that. We understand like never before the complexities. As Sylvia often says, now we know. We know lots. We have decades of research. We have thousands and thousands of, tens of thousands of data sets to show us exactly what's real here. The buildup of CO2, the temperature rise, the climate changes that we're seeing, the changes in runoff from both Antarctica and Greenland, the melting ice in the Arctic. You can go and see these things, right? We have the evidence right before us, as well as all these other measurements that we are able to take. And it's not just affecting the oceans, it's affecting all the things that live here on our planet. We can either try to mitigate it, do something about it, or we can just say, you know what, that's just how it is. Things are going to be different. Get your cocktail, pull up your folding chair out on the ice, and live with it. And we hope that's not the case. So we want to talk a little bit about managing ourselves right now. And to do that, I'm going to first introduce Jon. And Jon, I'd like if you could start out by telling us a little bit about your background. It's fascinating. Jon is Native American and has an amazing connection to the planet and an amazing perspective on it. But what's your story, Jon? How did you get here?
I'll be brief, I hope. So, like you said, I'm Native American. I'm S'Klallam and Chippewa Cree. I was born in France. I'm, I think, considered an immigrant. I understand President Obama's birther problem in a unique sense. Over the years, though, let's see, I only finished the 9th grade. And in the days of Vietnam, you had a choice because you didn't want me as your son. Basically, I was a criminal. And a judge gave me a choice, go in the military or go to prison. And I chose the military. I spent 20 years in there, retired as a Navy Chief Petty Officer. The day I retired, I flew to Alaska. I lived out in the bush for a long time. And the native people there, though, got a hold of me and asked me to work with them. And we created an organization with 70 tribes and First Nations that were taking care of the Yukon River. That's now grown, though. I've moved to Portland, Oregon at the behest of the National Science Foundation. And we are now working on a global network of indigenous people to monitor and protect the planet. Which takes me to Africa and South America, and recently, as the day before yesterday, we returned from Siberia. And that network is now growing, and we hope to include all of you in it.
Wonderful stuff. And Sylvia, boy, we could do a whole hour on your background, but we'll keep it short. So you're wonderful. We all love you. You grew up in New Jersey and got connected to the ocean at an early age. You have been so involved as a champion of the planet. You won the TED Prize in 2009. You formed Mission Blue, the organization that you run to this day, which is focused on hope spots, setting aside areas of the ocean specifically. You've often said that we should be setting aside ocean tracts the way we do land tracts with national parks, because why should we care? What has the ocean done for us today?
Do you like to breathe?
Oh yeah, there's that.
Listen up. And I also started a little venture, deep ocean exploration and research, because as you pointed out earlier, I love submarines. And my daughter and son-in-law love submarines and the technology that enables us air breathers to be able to, both vicariously with remotely operated systems and personally in little submersibles, to go take ourselves into the deep. I mean, I sometimes wish I could be a dolphin or a whale or some of the seabirds that are air breathers, but they can hold their breath and go really deep and stay really long, longer than we can, deeper than we can. But even they are limited. And most of life on Earth lives deep. I mean, lives in the dark. The average depth of the ocean is 2.5 miles, 4+ kilometers. The maximum, 11 kilometers. Where only 3 people have been in all of history. And come back.
Yeah.
But I like submarines that come back, of
Yeah,
course.
there's several still down there.
Yeah, well, not the 3 who made the
Right.
ultimate descent. But, Jon, I love your perspective about working with people who have been in a place for long periods of time and have come in some kind of harmony, some appreciation for how we fit in to the environment, if you will. I mean, I'm indigenous to Earth. Everyone here is indigenous to Earth. Mars, well, maybe there will be generations in the future
Let's do a
whose
quick
home
poll.
is Mars. But
How many are Earthlings in the room? Okay, pretty much everybody. Okay.
or an oceanling.
And so that's really good. Now, Jon's perspective on this, because we've talked about this, Jon, what we've called native wisdom and the balance of that, not balance of, but in conjunction with what we now call science.
Yeah, so first of all, I think we all possess native wisdom. I think our modern society has forgotten, though. They've set it aside. And so when we, as like my good friend here, Chief Augustine, when we look out across the land, we see it through a different lens than the modern society. The world to us is, as we see the trees, the rocks, the fish, the birds, it doesn't matter. They're all our relations. They're our relatives. And we respect that. The modern society, I don't know. I think we've forgotten it because we've gotten used to all this. Yeah. When it gets cold, we push a button and it gets warm. It gets hot, we push a button and it gets cool. We live in a square box at times that doesn't even have a view of the outdoors except through our little device. That's how we connect. How can you care about someplace you never touch or you never connect with? That's a difficult thing for a native person to understand that lives on the land and is affected by these changes every day. So that's a little perspective.
And you lost your cell phone recently, and you...
Oh. Yeah, so let me say this. You can't do any of this by yourself. My wife is in the front row. She works, we're colleagues and we're married, and she's the photographer and the writer and many things. So we were on the Potomac River with about 140 Native youth in canoes. Many of them had never been in the canoes before because they were from the Southwest. They have no need. We had a minor collision and my cell phone went into the Potomac. It did not survive. That was a month ago, and it's been refreshing in a way. I consciously said, you know what, I'm not going to go run out and get another one. Let's see what happens. And the most important thing I've learned from this is I have more time. That's the most important thing you get on this whole planet, is your time. They pay us for it. We measure it to the finest little 0.000 whatever. But it is. It's all you really get on this planet. And so many people these days are lost in that device. It's a great tool, don't get me wrong. It's an incredible tool. But we can't lose ourselves to it. So it's been refreshing. I've been a month. I'm recovering quickly. And I don't think I'm going to replace it.
So at Singularity University, we are not all about just the technology. Certainly that's an important piece of it here, because we do generally believe in the power of technology to help us do more and do better. But we're also very much into this mindset of positive impact in the world. We saw through some of those introductory slides that especially for the last 100 years and especially for the last 50 or 30 years, we have been accelerating the rate at which we are seeing our technology have a negative impact. And the old saying, what is it? If you don't change your direction, you're liable to end up where you're headed. Seems about true here with regards to some of that stuff. However, maybe there are some things we can do, both around technology and mindset. And I'm curious what each of you have to say about some of those things that you think we should be doing.
Well,
besides getting your cocktail and sitting on the ice.
Yeah. Well, I am thrilled to have arrived on Earth early in the 21st century as humans measure time, because never before could we know what is now knowable, what is out there for those who have access to technology that gives us the distillation of what we've learned through all preceding history. We're the beneficiaries of discovering, learning things, passing it along, learning things, passing it along. We do not have to start from scratch with each new generation to learn about language, to learn about numbers, to learn about whatever it is. And in my time, on my watch, I've been a witness to this amazing era of exploration and discovery, having people and satellites up in the sky to see the world for the first time, the way no other species, not just human beings, no other creature could see and know what humans now know. I think about 10-year-olds or 20, however old you are. You have access to things that the smartest people who ever lived before the 21st century could not know. Not that they didn't want to know, they could not know, because we just didn't have the capacity to be in the deepest parts of the ocean, to be able to crunch the numbers and see a bit of evidence here, and another bit over there, another perspective here, and pull it out of it. We're seeing patterns. We have the evidence of the melting ice in polar areas. We have the evidence of how many species, how many creatures lived on the planet. A big census of marine life, just the life in the ocean, which is most of life on Earth. 10 years, scientists looking at past records, museums, books, all that, expedition logs. Some idea of how many creatures have lived on Earth in the past, how many are there now, what's the future going to be able to project. We could not do that any time before. So it's like a collision course, because at the same time that we've learned more, the last 200 years, the last 100 years, the last 50 years, we've lost more than during all preceding human history. Why? Because not just there are 7 billion of us, but because of the technology that serves us so well also gives us the capacity to take from the ocean, for example, and from the land, cutting trees the way, do it with an axe, it takes a long time. Do it with a bulldozer or with a chainsaw. We've eliminated all but about 5% of the old growth forest in North America, and we've done it basically on my watch since I've been around. We have the capacity to kill on a level that is unprecedented, so that we've seen whole species be exterminated, like passenger pigeons. Even without greatly sophisticated technology, we could be able to do that. But 90% of the big fish in the ocean, a lot of the little ones too, were here in 1900, in the middle of the 20th century, and now they're here. We have the capacity to extract half the coral reefs, either gone or in a state of sharp decline.
And not just the capacity, we're actually doing it. We have
proactively
arms
doing
with
it.
chainsaws just sweep through forests.
Yeah.
We have trawlers with nets that go thousands of feet deep.
But the good news is we can also turn things around.
We
We
can.
could kill the last whale.
By
We chose
managing
not to.
ourselves.
Yeah,
Right?
right. Oh, no, we have to manage the whales. What are the whales doing? They're doing okay until we're out there or the tunas or the swordfish. 1% of the oysters in Chesapeake Bay are all that remain of the native oysters. We're really good at finding them and munching on them until they're just about gone. But there's still some there.
Yeah.
We still have 10% of the sharks and
There's
half the coral reefs, yeah, if we manage ourselves.
If we manage ourselves. And I think this speaks to some of the native wisdom. I'm hesitant to use that, but I think there's something to it, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, so the managing of ourselves. Mary and I have the great fortune and opportunity to work at the very nexus of humans and technology. The native people we work with in some of these remote regions are unaffected by the infrastructure we've developed over the 20th century with the copper wires and all that. That didn't exist in their world. So the modern technologies, smart devices and the like, have only just arrived in their communities, which is empowering them to get into this conversation. Some of the things we've seen, we worked with 70 tribes of First Nations on the Yukon, monitoring their water. And from that has grown something we'll introduce this spring that'll be monitoring with your smart device, your cell phone, monitoring your water with that. We'll introduce it actually first on the Lena River in Siberia. But out of that 70 tribes and First Nations, as they understood their water through modern technology, water monitoring equipment provided by YSI, sent to the USGS labs in Denver, we created a water management plan for the entire 325,000 square miles of the Yukon watershed and took it. Sally Jewell was Department of Interior at the time. We took it to her, and she said, this is absolutely what we need. It empowered these native people to take control of their resources and protect them. So at that nexus of humans and technology, we can actually make a difference and take control of these things and make a difference on this planet, make it better for everyone.
And it starts with knowing, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You have to know. I mean, part of the problem we experienced with the natives was on the Yukon, the native people there, was we could not explain what was wrong with the water. They knew the fish and birds were dying, or they were coming in with lesions, or the stocks were going down. But we could not explain it in scientific language. At one point, the native leadership came to us and said, please go out and take the pulse of the river. And in the native world, that's the entire instruction manual. Go take the pulse of the river. We had no idea what we were doing. We got 2 canoes. We were going to go down and talk to everyone about environmental stewardship. 2 weeks before we left, I sat down with the crew and said, this is not going to work. And they said, what? We've been a year planning this. And I said, yeah, I understand, but we're only talking to the native people. We need to talk to everyone else. And they are going to look at us as 2 Indians in a canoe, and they've all seen the movies. It's the stereotype. That's what we do. So I said, we're adding in modern science with some technology. And a company gave us some incredible water monitoring equipment. We very quickly modified it, built our own computer programs, set up telemetry equipment in the canoe, solar-powered everything, and went down the river and built a water monitoring profile of that entire river system that nobody else on the planet had ever done before. Now, the U.S. government uses that to understand what's going on with the Yukon. The scientists got very excited. We're applying that around the world now on river systems. And it's kind of nice to tell your boss, hey, I'm going to be gone like 3 months in a canoe. But the point is, it's people doing this. And as you build out these systems, they actually have skin in the game. You can do this in Ohio. You can do this in Kenya. You can do it in places around the world. They have skin in the game. They're monitoring their world. It's empowered them to do that. And that develops care for the planet. And as they do that, they will confront people that maybe want to mess up that estuary, that river, that forest, or the ocean.
But how do we get people who have never even seen the ocean to care about it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What do we do? I mean, what is it?
You know, as they understand it, so I work mostly on rivers, and, they understand upstream, all the junk's coming to them. I was sitting in Tempe talking to a group of chiefs there. And Tempe is in Peru. It's fairly reasonably remote. And they understood all the junk that was showing up in their village was coming from Cusco. And they said, we need to go talk to the leaders of Cusco. And they understood that. But as they gained that understanding, they understood not to dump stuff in the river, because eventually they understood that it would end up in the Atlantic Ocean. And that Tempe, Peru is about as far away from the Atlantic Ocean as you can get, but they understood the downstream effect, that it would end up down there, and they would be affecting not only the human relatives, but all their relations. So they stopped doing that. It was amazing.
We need people to connect. Over the good news is, I say the good news, over half of the human population lives within about 50 to 70 miles from the seashores all around the world, so they are close. But it is this knowing that you keep talking about, Sylvia, that people still don't know. To put it very bluntly, we've treated the ocean for thousands of years as both toilet and refrigerator at the same time. We dump into it and we take out of it. And we are still learning and still understanding new things, even though we know a lot now. It was just in 1986 when we learned about what?
Prochlorococcus.
Prochlorococcus, our favorite cyanobacteria. Most people here know that over half of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean, and up to 20% of it comes from one particular little microbe called Prochlorococcus that we didn't know existed until 1986 when Penny Chisholm at MIT discovered that fact. That isn't that long ago. There are still things we're learning, but now we know that, and we keep getting more of these now we know things.
It was about the same time that we stopped commercially killing whales globally. And from the mid-'80s, that's about when nations established jurisdiction out 200 miles.
Now that's important. What does that mean that people have done that?
We have responsibility out 200 miles.
It's ours.
Well,
that's what we say.
Yeah.
Okay.
As if we could own
Yeah.
the earth or the ocean or the
It's
air
all
or
our responsibility.
whatever. But the idea, of course, we have jurisdiction, we have the responsibility to take care. And the idea, to leave the place at least as good as you found it. But right now, our charge has to be, we've got to take this period of decline and turn the corner. That's just try to live so that during your lifetime, we see the trend moving in the other direction. That's the responsibility that we ought to have. I mean, parents want their kids to have a life at least as good as they have had. And if they really get it right, it'll be a better life for the next generation based on what you can do for them, for the future. But look at our track record over the last century, the last half century. And the pace is really accelerating in the wrong direction. The one critical thing that's different is now we know. We know that we've got a problem. We've got a lot of individual problems, but it collectively means we have to look at the natural world, our life support system that Mars does not have. Mars has a big rock, some water, maybe some life, but here we've got all the ingredients in place that have worked through all of our history and a long time before we arrived to have a planet that works in our favor. And it would seem that perversely we're doing in ignorance mostly, but now even consciously doing things that are not in our favor. Our life support system is in trouble. Just look at the numbers.
What can we do? How do we manage ourselves? Give us one concrete thing that we can do to help manage ourselves to begin to address this problem. I know the list is big, but...
I'm going to give that question to John.
Okay, John. I'm going to throw one in. Here's one little tiny concrete example. Tiny, tiny, tiny. Who will agree with me right now that you will not use plastic straws anymore? Raise your hand. Take the pledge right now. I will not use plastic straws, right? Don't do it. There's one tiny little thing. By the way, you'll be surprised at how fast that grows into other things. John, what are some concrete examples?
Well, this circles all the way back to what I said at the beginning, where as our modern society has gone along, we have forgotten the lessons of the past. The indigenous people, over all the centuries, learned that the price of failure is high. Using all your resources, the price of failure is the end of your society. Easter Island is a very good example of how they crashed their society by using all the resources. Indigenous people learned that lesson the hard way. We are learning that lesson right now, that as we go along, if we use all the resources, we're going to crash the party, and we can't move to Mars. Simple little things, first of all, is like we're doing right here, is getting out and discussing this, talking to each other, but going beyond that and not just talking to people that agree with you, but talking to the people that maybe don't agree and being strong about it. You know, I've sat with some CEOs of some large corporations and got them into the game here helping us out because we talked about water, something we all have to have. We're 80% water. We have to have it physiologically. I used to be a survival instructor in the United States Navy. I can tell you, you will not last beyond 6 or 7 days without water. You will die. Everyone understands that. Well, we also, maybe we like fishing, maybe we like boating, maybe we like our kids going swimming. That's where our connection was, beyond the water that we're made of. And that's where these corporations got in the game and started helping out. So there's something we can do, is talk to the people that maybe don't agree with us.
Well, 100 years ago, this nation had what some call the best idea America ever had with establishing national parks. And we have our predecessors to thank for that idea. It was mostly to protect landscapes and recreational areas, places that were beautiful but vulnerable to the advance of us on the land. And more recently, some have at least as good an idea about looking out into the exclusive economic zones that now exist and establishing blue parks. Blue parks, marine sanctuaries, a good start in that direction, although there are areas that are not really safe for squid or fish or shrimp, where a lot of extraction continues in most parts of the marine protected areas. But there are some that are fully protected, even within the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary. And California, woohoo for California as a state within state waters, has just in the last few years established an important network, like a necklace of fully protected areas where even the fish are safe. What a concept. They can make more fish and restore some of the areas where their numbers have taken a nosedive in recent decades. Not so much for the squid, you know, they're fair game everywhere. But here's the thing. What can you do? You can support those ideas in protecting the natural systems, restore the places that have been depleted, and take care of those places that are magically still in good shape. The National Geographic has this program of identifying pristine areas, pristine seas, and then encouraging people and the governments to take action. And Mission Blue, the organization that I've been involved with, we look around the world and see what places are the most critical, the breeding areas, the feeding areas for fish and other creatures. And again, the national park concept, the wildlife protected areas. We need them, and now they need us to take action, because if we wanted to, we could kill every last whale, every last tuna. We have the power to do it, but also to show restraint. And even in your backyard, I love the backyard projects that it's land as well as ocean, of course, but if you love your lawn, think about maybe you would love some native plants there instead. lawns take up an awful lot of territory in North America and parts of the world otherwise, and they're kind of nice. But wildflowers or the native shrubbery, anyway, it's just, what can you do? Look in the mirror. See what you can do personally, the choices you make about what to eat or not, or what to buy or not. Or there's so many things that every individual, I like the idea of Warren Buffett started counting his pennies when he was a little kid. And it added up after a while to enough to really start something important. If you think of every one of us as one of those little pennies, you get enough of us moving in one direction, anything's possible.
And so John's going to actually ask us to
yeah.
commit to something here.
So, the simple little thing we can do, like I said, is talk to people we don't know. Maybe they disagree with us, maybe they agree with us, but talk to them about this, get something going. So everybody please stand up, because this is the important part. We need to connect to everyone that we know and don't know about this. This is so important to the planet. I mean, if we do not connect and start doing something together, we will fail. Easter Island, not good. So, what I want you to do, put your hand like this. Touch someone you've never touched before. Yeah, there we go. Okay. We're talking about connecting and committing to each other, about taking care of this planet and moving forward into the future together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. A big thank you to Dr. Sylvia Earle, to Jon Waterhouse. Check out Mission Blue. Check out John's work. And thank you all so much for joining us here today. Thank you.
Check out Jonathan.